Let's welcome our guest speaker, Dan Papes.
Thank you. Thanks, Bruce. It's great to be here with you guys tonight, this evening. I'm sorry some of you guys are going to have to hear some of my lines and my bad jokes a few times in the same day. But I really am pleased to be able to speak with you today. And Bruce did a great job, without us really talking about it, setting the table around sales. So I remember when I was 22 years old, I was training for sales at IBM, and one of the senior salesmen, he's late 50s, career salesperson, comes to me and he says, you know anybody who, when they're 5 years old and they're in elementary school and they're talking about what they want to be when they grow up, who says they want to be a salesman, right, or a salesperson? Or when they're in high school, they want to be a salesperson, or in college. And very few people would say that, and many people end up in that field, starting their career and even spending their whole career in sales. It really is interesting how little material there is through our education system, including through grad school, around the concept of sales and the basic keys to success, and sales methodology and processes and so on. It's a really, really broad subject that I am going to summarize with my point of view of what it is that makes a salesperson and a sales organization successful. There are other opinions and perspectives on it, but I'm just going to give you mine, and I'm going to try to color it with real life experiences that I've had. The majority of my career was in sales, and I worked my way up through sales into executive positions where I had more broad general management and eventually to the president of a company. So, okay, so let me, the other thing I need to tell you, I told you guys earlier today. Anybody use Upwork here? You use Upwork?
I used it during an internship.
For what?
During a previous internship.
You did? Okay. So I did mine. This guy Usama from Egypt who put these together for me on very short notice. But Upwork, you can actually contract with somebody online to do all kinds of different things. To unencrypt the audio file, or to build a PowerPoint presentation for you, and all kinds of other things. You should check out Upwork. The company's flying, doing really, really well. Okay, so there are a few things, because there's a little bit of a language gap. You might catch some oddities in my slides. Okay. He did a build on all the slides. So, people make fun of salespeople, right? Sometimes they say, just another salesman or a slick salesperson. But if you look at this, right? No, I can't be bothered with any crazy salesman. We've got a battle to fight. And here they are, right, with their swords and whatever they call those things. And this guy, the salesperson, has a machine gun. But this guy doesn't have time for it, right? And the really, really good salespeople can figure out how to get into that tent and show them how you're going to be able to change their future, right, with the product that you have. And it's oftentimes very difficult, because people really do say, I don't have time to talk to a salesperson. They think of a salesperson, they think of buying a used car, or other things that people do. But it's a art that a good number of people are good at, very few people are great at, and a lot of people aren't anywhere near as good at it as they should be. And the skills in sales and the concepts of sales help you in all aspects of life. I just, maybe I'll get into a little bit of that as I go through the presentation. But so just going to give you a little bit about my background, and I'll tell you a few stories from that might be interesting. Kind of how I think of sales, what sales mission is, how you do it to some degree. And then I'm going to tell you some sales examples, some situations that I was actually in that were real life sales situations and ways that you could be successful, and then some organization models. So if you're leading a sales organization or you're part of a sales organization, what's the best way to attack the market where you're trying to sell your product or service? There are multiple different ways to organize in order to do that, and I'm going to show you the three primary ones in my mind that can drive significant success. And you choose one of the three depending on the nature of your organization, the nature of your products and services, and of the market that you're trying to sell to. That's what I'm going to do. So just a bit about my background. So I've had really, really interesting jobs in my career. Sometimes when I sit down and talk to people about it, and I tell them the jobs that I've had, like, wow, that's the way things came together for me, really interesting, and most of it was just, luck, or what they say is preparation meeting opportunity, or something like that. So my first job was I went through a year of training, a year of sales training at IBM. I don't think anybody does that anymore, but it was, Dan, we expect nothing from you except for you to learn for a year. And the IBM sales training program was widely recognized as the best sales training program, really in industry worldwide. So I was very fortunate to have that education. Then I was dropped into Kennedy Space Center, where I was one of IBM's reps, and then eventually IBM's only rep, selling to federal contractors and to NASA for the space shuttle program. And it was a really cool job because I'm at Kennedy Space Center and I'm touching everything that has to do with the space program. I get to go there and meet all the people. I get to see the shuttles. I get to be at the launches right up, as close to the pad as you can get, things like that. It was cool. I was 23 years old. It's a great job. And I learned a tremendous amount about sales there, especially sales in the federal government environment, which is quite different from sales in the commercial environment. It moves much slower, and you really have to prove your value and differentiate your product, because basically they say, we've got widget A and widget B, which one's cheaper? Right? And you got to say, well, we're widget A, and yes, we cost 30% more, but let us tell you why widget A is what you want versus widget B. And that's not easy to do. In question and answer, if you guys want to know a little bit more about it, I'm happy to tell you kind of how we work that in the federal government sales and at Kennedy Space Center. Then I managed, so I was a salesperson, then I managed salespeople. And I was at Kennedy Space Center on the East Coast, then I came to Orlando, and I managed salespeople who sold to Disney and Universal Studios and Bell South and some other accounts that were in the Orlando metropolitan area. And I said this earlier, I'll say it again, because this is my revenge on them. Disney, I've talked to 20,000 customers in my career. None were more difficult or challenging than Disney was. So, when I go to the park, I got a little bit of a pit in my stomach, the whole family's having a great time, and I'm just remembering this guy and what he said to me, and how he made me make no money on the product sales that we did with them and things like that. They're really tough customers. Anyway, that's...
You're not the only person that said that, actually.
What's that?
You're not the only person that said that.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting. Then there was a time where IBM, some of you may not know this, IBM was the most respected company in the world, arguably. It was the most profitable company in the world in 1980, in the early 1990s, when I came out. And IBM made a very strategic move in the early 90s. They started, instead of us selling products and services, we started outsourcing people's IT environments. Say, GM, you no longer need an IT department, and you no longer need to buy computers and software or anything like that. We're going to buy all that from you, and we're going to run it for you, and you pay us a monthly fee, a big monthly fee, right? So that was outsourcing, and there's still a lot of that going on today. It's kind of evolved into cloud, but essentially, I moved into that new business unit around outsourcing at IBM. It was IBM moving from products to services. And IBM today is primarily a services company, so from that change. But really, really interesting, because you had to convince somebody to basically take about $100 million worth of infrastructure that they bought and that they're operating, and maybe 1,500 employees, and say, give all that to me, and we're going to run it. And you often had to sell that to the chief information officer. We figured out eventually you should sell it to the chief financial officer, right? But the chief information officer was kind of like, well, what's best for, really, like sort of what happens to me if we do this, right? So we learned a couple lessons there. Is you would reassure the CIO immediately when you start selling, by the way, if we do this, we've got, we're an IT company. You're an auto company right now. You're coming to an IT company. And you can have a really bright career here. You're kind of at the top of where you can do GM, right? And so we had that conversation very early on. Like, yeah, IBM, right? So there was that. And then we did evolve the chief financial officer because it was primarily a financial sale, right? We can, by running yours GM and yours Ford and yours Citibank and yours JP Morgan and putting it all together and leveraging staff across and infrastructure across all of those customers, we can do it for a lot less than you can do it yourself. And it's what we do for a living. You build autos for a living. We run IT for a living. That's sort of the sales, giving you a little bit of the sales pitch. I haven't gotten to give it in a long time. Then I'm in a web hosting business unit is when companies were starting to get on the web. In 1995, companies weren't on the internet. I don't know when we started doing email, but maybe it was in the early 90s, real email. It was the early 90s, mid 90s. But companies weren't on the internet. They wanted to have a website. And we started a business unit, it started about 6 months before I took it over, where we would say, we'll put your company on the web. And it was great. That was one of those where demand was, it wasn't a tough sell, right? You go out and talk to a customer and they'd be like, yes, I know, my CEO and my board has been beating me up. We don't have a web presence. We need it. And then that evolved into, doing commerce on the web, selling products on the web, which to you guys is all routine. I worked sales and alliances I left IBM during the dot-com boom and went to a small consulting company, an e-commerce consulting company that was helping enterprises figure out how to put their businesses on the web, what their web strategy ought to be. Cool job, and IBM bought us, which was, I got sucked right back into the vortex, but it was my fault because I went back to IBM, and long story, but it was good. Then I ran an independent business unit inside IBM, funded with venture capital. What I did there, you guys would be interested in, is I went in, it's a long story how we got here, but I ended up going to IBM's M&A team, and I had a 20-page presentation. In fact, I could do something with that, Bruce, maybe if you wanted me to. It's a 20-page presentation that I did about, it was a business case presentation, basically. It was, here's the market. It started with here's the concept, then here's what the market looks like. Here's my team, and one PowerPoint slide on each member of my team and all their experience related to the business and the strategy and so on and so forth. It was a whole, and the M&A guys told me, it was with some friends of mine. They said this is the best, one of the best cases we've seen put in front of us. So anyway, we started that, and it was very, very successful. And then we folded it back into IBM, and I stopped doing it because it was too bureaucratic and political, and there were other things. I like to run my own business kind of thing. So then I went to work for Westcon, which was a 4.5. When I left, it was a $6 billion company where I started the data center and cloud division for them. And then, last but not least, I'm going to tell you stories about when I was the president of Unified North America. Digital Realty was the job I left July 1st last year. I was a Section 16 officer, which means I would appear on earnings calls, and every stock trade I made was monitored and things like that. It was a really, really interesting job, but it was in San Francisco, and I live in New York, and I either would have had to move there or eventually leave. So I left, but I still do work for them. Okay. Sales is all about customers, and doesn't that sound so basic, right? Sales is all about customers, but I will tell you, many companies, most companies, are so busy trying to operate their business that they either forget that that's the case, or they lessen the importance of it because they lose focus and they're focusing on other things. And what the most successful companies in the world, with a few exceptions, including the company I picked on in my earlier presentation, with a few exceptions, if you're not customer-centric, you're not going to be as successful as you can be, or you're going to fail. Customer centricity is the key. Building everything about your business around what your customers want and need. And there are multiple ways you can understand what's happening in the market in order to figure out, if you're the CEO of a company and the leadership team of a company, you're trying to figure out, what do our customers want? What does the market need? We can hire McKinsey Consulting or Gartner or some other consulting company to come tell you what they think the market needs. And that's a valid input because they survey the market and things like that. But your number one best, by far, source of what your customers, your target customers and existing customers need is your sales team. Because if you have a halfway decent sales team, every day they are calling on customers. And they're coming back to the business if you are listening to them. They're coming back to the business and telling you what your customers need. And the right leadership team is listening to all that and putting it all together and saying, Joan says this, Mary says that, Tom says this, and Elaine says that. And some of it is the same and some of it is different, and when you put it all together, it tells me everything I need to know about the market. And people forget that. I'd say leaders and managers inside companies lose sight of that. Again, you get distracted in the day-to-day operation of the business. You forget about customers, and you forget to make sure you're taking all that information that your salespeople are bringing in to tell you what customers want. And it makes sales properly managed, the most important organization that you have inside of your company, right? So, what is sales, right? How do you sell? This is a subject that I could do a whole semester on, but I'll just give you a few basic things. Sales is simply solving a customer's problem or meeting a customer's need with your product or service. And I say meeting it, it's showing them how your product or your service meets their needs. Every executive, every manager, every professor, every professional has things that are holding them back from being even more successful than they could be otherwise. The common term is pain points. We all have pain points. And we go to doctors when our back hurts, right? So that's a pain point. The key there is to find out what are the pain points of your potential customers and what are the features and functions of my product that solves that problem or helps them capture the opportunity that they see that they can't get to yet, right? So this capturing an opportunity too, it doesn't mean just all customers have are problems and you need to solve problems. There are others who say, boy, if we could just reach this market, and you come in and say, well, I can help you reach that market, right? Let me tell you about this feature and this feature and this feature of my product. So that's the key. What's wrong? What's keeping you up at night? Why can't, what's going to stop you from getting your personal bonus this year? Right? Well, I've got this, I've got just the thing. And if you do this, you're going to get your bonus, the company will be better off, you're going to solve that problem, right? And aligning those things is really key. And the number of salespeople I see who can, a customer will say, I have this and this and this problem. And then the salesperson will say, well, we have this, this, and this, and they have nothing to do with these three things. It's very common. Listen, understand, and then you come back with what it is about your product that can help. This doesn't all have to happen in one meeting, right? Some of the most effective sales calls are you go out and you just say, hey, Dan Papes, I'm from IBM, and we're recently expanding in your industry, and I wanted to spend some time with you and just understand what's happening with your business, what challenges you have, and blah, blah, blah. And they start talking, and they give you a whole list of things. And you say, that's great. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go back and meet with my team and take a look at our portfolio, products and services, and see if we can help you with some of those things. Thank you, bye-bye, have a nice day. Okay? Come back and say, you told me you have problem A. Here's the feature of our product that solves that one for you. Problem B. Here's another feature of our product that solves that problem for you. Problem C, right? And tying those things together like that is key. And using their own words when you talk about it back to them. You told me this is the most important problem that you have and you can't solve it. I think that's what you said, right? Look, you got it. So that's that. Yeah, so I said that stuff. Okay. So 4 keys to success. See, my friend Usama built this into build-up slides. I'm going to build the whole thing right now. Okay. I said, understand your customer and industry needs. We already talked about that, right? Then you align your product and service, the features of your product or service, to those needs, right? You have to be talking to a decision maker when you and I had that conversation. We have to be, you need to be the decision maker. You might be somebody that I'm spending a lot of time with. What's your name? Eugene? So Eugene and I might be spending a lot of time together, and Eugene may not have any ability to make a decision, may not have any budget, but Eugene is just responding to the interaction with me. I need to make sure, before I spend too much time with Eugene, unless we're going to go to lunch and talk about sports or whatever, when I'm selling to Eugene, that Eugene is the person who's a buyer or a significant influencer on the buyer. And this is another place where, believe it or not, a very, very common error. A salesperson spends a ton of time with somebody and that person can't make the decision nor significantly influence the decision. And a lot of times you go through the entire sales cycle and then you lose, and then you do a review on the loss, and then you say, wait a minute, Eugene doesn't make decisions on these kinds of things. Mary does. Like, we spent all that time with the wrong person? You would probably be the decision maker, and we would have spent our time with the wrong person. But anyway, you get the idea, right? Access to the decision maker. You need to understand your product and service so you can align the solution to the customer needs. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few examples, real life situations that I've been in. So this is a little bit different day in finance when we outsourced Morgan Stanley's IT organization. But at the time, Morgan Stanley was spending hundreds of millions of dollars of capital and had hundreds of millions of dollars of operating expense on their IT environment. And it was constraining their ability to build new branch offices, to invest in new product banking, product R&D, not IT related stuff, and a whole bunch of other things. And so they said, it was a big financial problem for them. What we did is we came in and we said, you know what? For $1 billion, we'll buy all your stuff. And we're going to take your 5,500 employees that you have running your IT infrastructure, and we're going to take them off your books too. And instead of going out, twice a year and spending $100 million on a mainframe there and $200 million on storage here, you just pay us a monthly fee of X amount for the next 8 years or 10 years or something like that. And boom, they jump on that and say, that is absolutely fantastic. We get all these assets off of our books. These 5,500 people, turn into a operational expense. We know you're going to be able to, reduce that expense for us by using those 5,500 people on other customers as well, not just Morgan Stanley. And we run the whole IT environment better than they do, because it's what we do. We are an IT services company. Okay, AT&T. So this one is a little, sorry about the spelling error there. This one's an interesting one. I'm going to try to articulate it. I should have put together a slide for you. But one of the jobs I left out in my description of my history was, I was assigned to AT&T, which was IBM's largest account in the world. I was assigned to them as a salesperson right after my Kennedy Space Center experience. And it's IBM's largest account in the world, and all the sales reps in the team were making a lot of money. And now I'm coming in, this energetic, I think it was 25-year-old, I'm like, can I make the same amount of money Mark Ford made? Wow. It was really a big opportunity for me. And I remember I go out and I call on, I had a really good earnings year my first year, not as much as Mark Porzio, but a good earnings year. And then the next year, it was like December, and it was my job to go talk to the primary buyer at AT&T about their next year's budget. So they'd spent $350 million with us that first year. So now I'm talking about the next year's budget. And I'm sitting down with this guy, Danny Lemons was his name. I sit down, I said, so Danny, we're putting together our plan for next year, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm not asking you to commit that budget to me, but what's your budget for this year? And he said, Dan, it's very thin for next calendar year. We've got all these constraints because of this and that and this and that, and so we're only allocating $12 million to new IT. So $350 million. He's telling me $12 million. And by the way, IBM's already given me a quota of $380 million, right, which they're going to pay me on or not pay me on if I don't hit it. And so $12 million. Danny, no, Danny, you don't understand. You can just read it in the papers, all the things that are happening. We're doing everything we can to cut our costs. So I go back to my manager and I tell him, you gotta be kidding me. So now we're staring at, what are we gonna do? And everything we try to have them do over $12 million is against it's in excess of their budget, and it's bad for the people we're selling to, and very hard for us. So we did something really unique. AT&T was leasing most of their mainframe computers, and you guys probably don't encounter mainframes very often, but mainframe computers, which cost like $20, $25 million each, and disk storage that was maybe this big and taller than me, that contained 2.5 gigabytes of storage, 2.5 gigabytes of storage this big for $2.5 million each, right? So, which you can buy now for 50 cents at Walgreens. It's really mind-boggling when you think about it. It's absolutely mind-boggling when you think about it. But so anyway, they leased their mainframes, and they leased their disk storage, and their stuff was fairly new, which they got at a discount, and we had some new products that we could sell them, that we wanted to sell them, we planned to sell them, but they only had a $12 million budget. So what we did was we went and we were trying to solve this problem. Like, how do you do $375 million with a company that has a $12 million budget? And the answer was, we went in and we bought the equipment that they had leased. We sold it in the market, and we leased them new technology for basically bigger mainframes. So we take 2 mainframes, buy them from them, sell those mainframes in the open market, and give them 1 mainframe that costs less than those 2 mainframes, and lease that to them. So it was something like, I don't know the marker, but it's something like, just as an example, I don't know the real numbers, but something like they were paying $100 million a month for their leased mainframes and disk storage. Say $100 million a month. We went in and gave them new technology, right? Made money on the resale of the products, and then we were charging them $80 million a month. So they didn't even have to spend their $12 million that year. And we did $438 million or something that year in sales to AT&T. Right? We solved the problem for them. We reduced their expenditures in a year where they badly needed it, and we sold a ton of new equipment. It was fantastic. It was a win-win. And that's by thinking about what's their problem, what do we have that's a solution to this, right? And it worked out great for both sides. Okay, those are all rough numbers. We're recording this. It's orders of magnitude. It's about those kinds of numbers that we did with AT&T. Okay, Exxon. So this one, again, is sort of a dated example, but it's worth pointing out. Exxon. I remember I had a friend when I was going through IBM training, and his customer was Exxon, and he's telling me how much they're selling to Exxon, and I'm like, how could that be? How could that be worth it to them? They're spending like $250 million a year on mainframes, and you know, all this other stuff, and I don't know, the numbers were just ridiculous. And but just to give you an example, it was something like every time they drill where they think there's oil, they spend $150 million. And they drill these major test wells all over the place, in the Gulf of Mexico, all over Texas, you know, and other areas. And if they don't get anything, that's all wasted money. So they're spending, you know, a few $1 billion a year or something, drilling these test wells, having some information that there might be oil, but not enough information to know for sure. So we have a supercomputer, basically, a mainframe that can process, you know, all kinds of complex data at the time. It's very, very unique. And what we could do is we could process all the geological data. It's like number crunching, like none of us can imagine, and say, you know what? You don't need to drill that one because there's nothing there. Boom, $150 million in savings. You know what? Nothing there. Another $150 million in savings. There's something there. $150 million, $2 billion well, right? And so that's the value delivered by that particular technology that we had at the time. And we have other versions of that today that save customers when they're spending a ton of money on IT equipment, but their return is far greater, right? And being able to communicate that, understand what is it, you know, that's going on with you, or drilling all these wells, you know, and it's like, it's wasting a ton of money. If only we could know. Well, we can tell you, right? So, okay. So those are some examples. Now, how do you, I'll just share with you a little bit of how I've structured sales organizations and some various things that, options and how you might go to market. So I've got digital realty. I have 200 salespeople. It's like, how do I want to organize this team to attack the market? What's the best way for me to get the maximum amount of money out of the market? Another way to say it is to provide to show the most customers that our solutions are going to meet their needs, right? One is by industry, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but basically by industry. So public sector, financial services sector, manufacturing, that's by industry. Another way you can do it is you can say we're going to do it by sector. We're going to say we're going to do all the network companies, all the cloud service providers, all the whatever. Okay, that's another way you can do it. And yeah, I'm going to illustrate this much better in a minute. You can do it by geography. You could say, I'm going to have an EMEA team, Europe, Middle East, Africa. I'm going to have a North America team, and I'm going to have an Asia Pacific team and a Latin America team. And then you also have the option, do you want to sell direct with your own people calling on customers? Or do you want to use agents or channel partners or distributors to sell your product for you? Or do you want to have a combination of that? Okay, so like direct and indirect. That's the hybrid. Okay, so let's just take a look at a regional organization. In a regional organization, let's just assume we're just a North American company right now. You can say, all right, we're going to divide into 3 regions. And I've used this model before. I had a senior vice president of sales in the East, senior vice president of sales in the Central, and senior vice president of sales in the West. And then they have their people underneath them, and there's a Southeast region, there's a Mid-Atlantic region, and there's a region here, all reporting to the East organization. And you do the same thing here, and the same thing there, right? Southwest, whatever you want to call it, Midwest, Central, and so you can divide your sales organization that way, and just say, you know what, we're going to sell all of our products. The salesperson here is going to sell all of our products in New York City, and that's the way we're going to do it. Another way to do it is a sector organization, which I talked about a little bit ago. So this is an organization that I implemented at Digital Realty, and it was a tremendous change that drove huge sales growth. So we used to go to market by product. We had two primary products. We had these mega data centers, 4 football field size data centers, multiple floors, right? We had products like that. And then we had products where we say, you know what, Eugene has a business with 200 people, and he's got an IT environment, and all he needs is a cage. They call it co-location. He needs a cage about, this big. And that's all he needs. Right? So there's 2 very different customers to sell to, right? The story I tell him is much different than the story I tell Google when I'm trying to convince Google to come to us. So, and then telecommunications sector, AT&T, Verizon, and others have a whole set of different needs when it comes to data center offerings, because they basically want to sell connectivity between all of these environments that I'm talking about, between Google, between Eugene's company, between Bloomberg and whoever. So we organize like that. These people know how to sell to Google, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM, etc. These people know how to sell to AT&T and Verizon and others, and those people know how to sell to GM, Bloomberg, Citicorp, whoever, right? And it's different. Those are different types of sales. Each one of them, you're telling a different story. You have a different value proposition. They have different problems that need to be solved in different ways. Okay? And then sales operations, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then at Digital Realty, we also had a channel and partner sector as well, which was, we doubled that. In 2 years, we doubled the amount of business we did through them. Was basically that product that I told you about, co-location, that you lease a room like this big, but you do it in volume, you do tons of them. That's better, a lot of that's better sold by a channel partner, somebody who specializes in that and has lots of relationships in companies and is selling them other IT services, not just the data center space. So we'd sell through them. We would just give them a 10% discount or 20% discount and say, here it is for you, and then they go sell it for whatever price they sell it for. That's through channel and partner. It's kind of like brokers, yeah. It's kind of like brokers. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of examples here, right? So you get an idea of who fits in what category, Okay, so here's an industry organization. Finance, right? These are some of the industries you might organize around. I did this at Unify. So at Unify, the company I went to before Digital Realty, at Unify we did this. At Digital Realty we did the sector organization. And I can explain why if anybody's interested later. But so we have these industry teams. At Unify, we had solutions specifically designed for retail buyers that a manufacturing company would have no interest in, right? And when you go out to talk to a retail buyer of IT, when you go out to talk to a retail buyer, they have, they respect people who understand I told you, you understand their business, you solve a problem for them. Well, if you're in the retail, so you're a salesperson here, your job is to, you either already do, or your job is to learn everything you can learn about retail buyers. And then when you, it's a bad example, retail buyers, because it sounds like buyer for Macy's, but people who buy IT equipment in the retail environment, right, or travel and transportation. So you speak their lingo. The lingo you speak to this person is completely different than the lingo you speak when you're talking to JP Morgan. So you organize your salespeople by that, and you build expertise in your salespeople in each one of the industries. That's the industry structure that that many use, and that I favor in a lot of ways. For various reasons, it wasn't the right thing for digital realty. So regional, sector, or industry, right, are the multiple ways you can do this. Right, so there's just some example customers in each one of those spaces that would fit in those, okay? Sales operations. Now, this is something that's really, really important, and a lot of people don't focus on it like they should. So, you need to be able to forecast your sales. You need to make sure you have the inventory, whether that inventory is labor or product. And so you need to be able to forecast what's coming in the next quarter, and what do we think is coming in the quarter after that. Sales operations helps you do all that forecasting. And they talk to your salespeople, they look at the sales pipeline, and they do that. Win-loss rate, you want to know, how are we doing? Last year, we won 40% of the opportunities we engaged in, but this year we've only won 35. What's wrong? Why is that happening? And who took that 5% from us? Or that 5 from us, right? So you want to know what your win-loss rate is. You want all that data. That's not salespeople so much as it's an analysis of the data and what the data is telling you, and therefore how you ought to adjust your sales organization. Loss reviews. So you lose a big deal to Ford, and say it's digital realty, or it's Unified. We lost it to a company called Cisco. Cisco beat us. So your sales operations, a person who's assigned to this kind of responsibility, gets all the people on the phone: the technical person, the salesperson, the manager, legal, finance, and you get on a call and you say, and you prepare material in advance and say, why did we lose? Why did we lose this deal to Cisco at Ford? What happened? And when you look at what happened, then you develop an action plan to make sure that all the things that cost you that deal at Ford don't cost you at GM. Right? You learn from your experiences. And all this comes out of your sales operation. Your salespeople aren't going to take any time to do this unless you grab them by the chin, say, sorry, you got to look at this. We got to understand what happened, right? So it doesn't happen again. You're like, no, I want to go talk to a customer. Sorry, sometimes you got to step back and understand what's going on, right? Productivity per sales rep. So you say, I've got 100 reps, and each one of those reps is producing $5 million a year. And so I could do 500 million with 100 reps. And you say, well, what if we hired 10 more? If we hired 10 more, we could do another 50 million. Or you could say the market's saturated, and you can look at everything. But you take a look at the productivity of your sales reps and understand, if you add more, how much more are you going to get? And maybe you do something, an analysis over time that says, if we add 5 more, we don't, if we could add 10 more, we're not going to quite get 50 million more, but we're going to get 40 million more. And if we get 40 million more, it's still worth it. Right? You also, through this, you say, wait a minute, why is Joe always, it's 5 million per rep. Why for the last 3 years is Joe at 2 million? Well, maybe this isn't the right thing for Joe. Right? Or Joe needs some training or whatever. Right? So that's all of this sales operation stuff is really key to running a successful sales organization. And then tracking by region, why are certain regions growing? Why are certain regions shrinking? Is it because we have poor leadership, or we don't have the right deployment model, or whatever, right? You want to understand, or a sector's suffering, or an industry team is suffering. So these are some of the things that I covered with you guys. But really understanding those needs, how to solve problems, tying that to your solution. One thing I didn't mention about partners and distribution companies and using channels is if I'm a new company, say you guys are starting a new company, and you say, you know what, I don't want to hire 10 salespeople. And the cost of 10 salespeople, you got to pay them a salary, you got to pay them a commission, and I don't even know how fast we're going to grow. You get a channel partner, somebody who already reaches, somebody has 500 salespeople already, who sells other people's stuff. And you say, you know what, instead of hiring direct salespeople, I'm just going to use a channel partner. And I'm going to discount my product to them and let them sell it. And they have all this reach. In many cases, so why not? Now, my favorite model is a hybrid model, but in a startup mode, that's only through partners is something worth thinking about. Okay, and we talked about the organization structures to consider, and I think that's all I had. Oh, and one more. I can't stress it enough. Making customer centricity. You have some people when you talk to them. I've used this expression many times, especially when I was only a sales leader, not a general manager or responsible for the whole business. And that is, people, this customer. And I said, this job would be easy if it weren't for customers, wouldn't it? And they kind of look at me. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Without them, there isn't a job. So we got to figure out how to make sure that we're keeping our customers happy. Okay, that's all that I had on charts. I think it went a little longer than I expected it to, but around time? Okay.
Keep it coming on, because I want to ask a question that, and then we could see for other people, but that I think is important. And I loved your example of Morgan Stanley, but what I wanted to ask you and get your take on feedback, or how if this came up with customers and how you dealt with it. You say to someone like Morgan Stanley, we're going to take away all your equipment, $1 billion of assets, and your people, the 5,500 people in IT. My first concern, if I was Morgan Stanley, is one, the held hostage thing. Well, what happens if now you've got everything and now you raise the rates, you do something? I understand some of that may be addressed by contracts, like 5 years, but how do you handle all the held hostage things? That's going to IBM, and what might they do? And then I need a service, so that's not included, whatever. The second area with that is if I was a senior person at Morgan Stanley, a secondary concern beyond held hostage would be that, like, what happens if something major happens to IBM? I mean, they almost went out of business in '93. How do I explain to my board of directors, as a public company, and my shareholders, that, I gave $1 billion of equipment, I gave 5,500 employees, I've got a little desktop calculator, but we don't have any IT, and IBM just declared bankruptcy. Can you address those concerns, or things like that came up with customers that you had to deal with, and what were some of the concerns they expressed? What was that one? And then how do you deal with them and put them at ease?
Yeah. So I'm glad you weren't my customer, by the way. These tough questions. No, those are very good questions. So first of all, depending on the situation, we outsource many people's IT environments. So I'm not going to talk about Morgan Stanley in particular. And by the way, the numbers I talked about with Morgan Stanley are numbers. I just throw them out, right, and you get an idea. The first thing you do is you have service level agreements. So we call them commonly SLAs. And with SLAs, you say, we're going to have, we're going to be available and online 99.999% of the time. And if we miss that number, for the time period that we do miss that number, we pay a penalty. Basically, we refund your money, and those penalties you put in there have real teeth, which incents IBM to make sure that we meet those SLAs and we don't have to refund to the customer. And you work together with the customer to figure out what those service level agreements are. That's a very, very important part of it. Then you can do, there are many different methods, but you can do an annual review of IBM's performance and IBM's financial situation, and you can have options in the contract that say, if IBM's performance over, not just SLA, but overall performance has not been satisfactory to us, then we have options to reduce the size of the contract, or we have options to start outsourcing some of the function to somebody else. And then you also do things like a technology refresh. So you can say it's a 10-year agreement. Say in year 4, we're going to do a technology refresh. We're going to come work with you at the beginning of year 4, and by the end of year 4, we're going to figure out what that new technology should be. And then in the agreement is our protections against IBM's, financial security, or whoever the outsourcer is, financial security, that allow essentially in the end very, very simplified version of a foreclosure. Right? We get it all back, the people back, everything back, and we have a transition that we would go through in order to do that would make sure that it's orderly. So you do all those kinds of things. Most certainly, the key thing that we sold as IBM, we did go through a few bad years there, but what we sold was, there's nobody who can do this. You want to do it, and some of our competitors have bid on it. There's nobody who can do this like we can, and there's nobody more financially sound than us. The other thing we would tell them is, because a lot of these companies, really, really people-conscious companies, they'd say, so I'm giving you 5,500 of my people. They're going from Morgan Stanley badges to IBM badges. You're going to fire 3,000 of them? Because if that's your plan, no thank you. Right? I don't care how much money we save. So you make agreements around the people as well. So that's how it works. But you are definitely, you're definitely stepping out when you outsource like that. There's a bit of a leap there. It's a great question.
Okay. And then Eugene, in one way, I want to turn off the video so no one's intimidated to ask a question. The other way, if there's a great question, we'd love to edit that in with the video. So why don't we go with people that are happy to ask a question with the video on. That way, if it is something that would be valuable to keep, we will, and then we'll turn the video off for everyone else.
One of you guys' biggest selling points was taking off like operational costs when you guys taking their people for, what you said perfectly, from Morgan Stanley to IBM. Do you guys just put that on your guys' book too? And if so, how do you guys eat up that cost?
Well, so there's leverage in it, right? So you say we have 5,500 people from Morgan Stanley come in, and we can use those 5,500 people for our internal projects. We're an IT company, right? So we have I don't know how many, when I was last at IBM, we had 500,000 employees, probably 300,000 of them, IT technical people. So we have lots of things they can do inside of IBM, right? We can use them to provide services to Morgan Stanley. We can use them to provide services to Morgan Stanley and Ford in 2 outsourcing things. We could have them go be programmers in product development for a new product that IBM's developing. We have all kinds of jobs for IT professionals. This is something we would say to Morgan Stanley, the only IT jobs, the only department you can employ your IT people in, generally speaking, is in your IT department. In IBM, we have 300,000 jobs for IT professionals. You have 5,500. And so that's what we would do. We would bring them in. Instead of hiring people from the outside, we'd take some of these Morgan Stanley employees and put them all over the company.
Second part of the question, it would be, would you guys like have a flat rate on their salary and everything else, or would they keep the same thing from their other company and shift it over? As well?
Generally, we would bring them over at the same salary, and we would put them on IBM benefits. If the IBM benefits were markedly better or worse, if they were better, we would put them right on IBM benefits. If they were worse, which wasn't typical, but sometimes it happened, when they were worse, we'd leave them for a year on their old benefit plan, and then gradually bring them onto the IBM benefit plan. So we do that. One outsource that we did that I was very, very deeply involved in. I remember talking to this woman. It was at Ford. As the Ford hospitals in I can't remember the name of it in the Midwest. And I remember talking to her. We're almost done with the deal, and she said, "Now." Actually, this was a reverse outsource. It's a complicated story. It was a reverse out. We were actually moving people to them. And I sat down with her and she said, "So it's really complicated here at our company to get people raises. We for the last 2 years been struggling. We haven't been able to give people raises and so on. If we do, it's 1 or 2%. So we were only moving, I think, like 28 people. So she just said, this is one-on-one conversation. She said, do me a favor. The week before you move them, could you give them all a 10% raise?" And I thought about it, and I went back and talked to my colleague, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If they build it into their numbers, we'll do it. So we did, a week before. It didn't cost us anything. It cost us a week's pay of 10% of their annual salary. But then they were able to move over, and they didn't have to go through all their internal processes in order to get the people the increases. So that was an interesting one. We have had outsourcing deals where people have said, we would like to see the people that we move over, boost. All the people that you leave behind here at Morgan Stanley or whatever the company is are going to see what you do to them, and we want them to know, we want our remaining employees to know that we don't throw our employees to a vendor and let them all get fired or have their pay be cut or anything like that. So the people thing was always a very sensitive thing.
Seems like an operational headache. Shifting everybody around or something moving parts to it.
Yeah, you start doing it, when the first time we did it, the first few times we did it, it was really, really complicated, and we made mistakes, and you make the wrong decisions in the process. But then you learn, and then you know how to do it.
Throughout a lot of the entrepreneurship classes, they kind of bring up these big companies, but honestly speaking, I don't think anyone here is gonna likely be the next Amazon or the next Facebook.
What am I? I'm talking to. See you.
No, but being able to start things small and kind of realistically without just having multi-trillion-dollar projections. So with IBM, they have a lot of leverage. So I was wondering if more for us as aspiring entrepreneurs, common mistakes that salespeople make at the point of sale. That's something we can be conscious of. Is a lot of us might be the ones who have to be out there selling our own product without the leverage of a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Yeah. Okay. And I've worked in several different sizes, and I get that question. I'm actually doing some consulting right now, advisory services for a company with 5 employees. It's venture capital funded. Very, very promising company. So a few things. One is this, all through the development of your offering, right? As you're figuring out what is the product or service you're building, you're building it around a set of market needs, right? While you're building it, my advice would be that you're constantly going to that market that you're targeting, finding people willing to talk to you, so you can make sure whatever your idea is the people that you're targeting buying it are listening to you describe it and are seeing value in it, right? So that's first thing, right? It's very, very common in large companies and small where people say, I got an idea. I got a really good, everybody needs this. And they develop it, and then they try to bring it to market. You're nodding your head, right? This is how they bring it to market, and it's not that it was a stupid idea, but but there's a disconnect between what you thought everybody wanted and what everybody wants, or what everybody's willing to buy. So getting all that feedback early, and if you can get that feedback, that also from people, some of those potential customers become your first customers you call on. Another thing I would say is find channel partners, like I mentioned earlier, right? You'll be making some sales, but a channel partner, if you get a channel partner interested in what you have, if they buy into it, they'll spend all the money to try to go sell it, because they'll make a piece of it. So, that's less sales on your back, and they reach, so many more people. One more thing I would tell you about that I would do if in a venture funded situation, we're doing it in the one that I'm involved in, which is if somebody's funding you, if you're doing it on your own money, it's one thing. But if you have VCs and private equity companies that are funding you, the good ones, and there are many good ones, and even some of the bad ones, they have relationships all over the place. So we're looking at a private equity company right now that we raised a certain amount of capital, but we need more, and we're going to people like who do we want to go to get the money from? First of all, we want to get the money from somebody who doesn't want to manage us, right? We know what we're doing. We don't want anybody to manage us. The other thing that we want is a firm that has relationships. So when Andreessen Horowitz invests $50 million in your business, they're now on the hook. They want you to be successful. They put 50 million or 2 million or whatever it is. It's all relative, right? When they put money into your business, they want you to be successful. And you say to them, who do you know? Who do you know who buys, this kind of software? Or who might know somebody who knows somebody? And these people at these private equity companies and VCs all have power, brand names, relationships, whatever. They have something, and they can help you get customers. So those are our two pieces of criteria. Who is going to leave us alone and trust us to use their money properly? And the second is, who's going to bring us customers? Right? And they want to, because it's good for them.
You specified all different type of sale organization, industry, sector and everything. How do you choose which model is suitable for your company?
That's also my question.
Yeah.
So, I'll just tell you, digital realty, I did sectors. Unify, I did industry. So it's back to back. I was president of Unify North America, then I went to digital realty. Unify North America, when I got there, you guys heard earlier where I talked about the roundtables I did and all this kind of stuff, so I started understanding our business. And I got tons of feedback during those roundtables with my employees. Basically, I met with a bunch of with 375 of my employees in just the first 6 weeks to try to understand what people thought the opportunities were. And so as I talked to them, I got all of our success came from those 6 weeks where people were telling me, because one of the questions, what's wrong? What opportunities are we missing? Right? What do you want me to know? What opportunities are we missing? Just an example. One guy says, we have the solution at Wells Fargo. It's a high-speed, high-volume trading solution. It's the best in the industry, and nobody knows about it. And we're doing it for Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo loves it. So I say, and then there were 7 or 8 other things. This is what we're doing for the SUNY schools. We had a solution that we had provided to SUNY Stony Brook. And so I'm listening to all this, and as I'm taking notes over those 6 weeks, I'm like, that's an industry solution. High speed, high volume trading. That's an industry solution for the financial services sector. And then we had a manufacturing solution. We had all these different solutions, and they were industry oriented. And I thought because we were selling regionally at the time. So I had somebody selling to Citibank and selling to Bloomberg and selling to the state government and selling to. There was no expertise. They knew our product, but they didn't know their customers well. So I look at all these things. I say, we've got a bunch of industry solutions here. So what I want to do is organize by industry, build the expertise in those industries, and so the finance person can call on Wells Fargo, call on Citi, call on Morgan Stanley, call on Deutsche Bank, call on, right, all these with our solution. So that one jumped out at me. When I went to Digital Realty and I looked, basically, I looked and said, so what are our solutions? What's in our portfolio? And how do our customers buy? And it's sort of like, I could use the same term on the industry thing, is what's the buyer persona? Right? What are the buyers like and what are they looking for? And are there any common characteristics among them? And at Digital Realty, the common characteristics were AT&T, Verizon, Vodafone, all these companies had the same kinds of challenges and opportunities that they wanted to solve, right? Network. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Uber, Microsoft, Salesforce, SAP, all these people were buying gigantic chunks of, leasing gigantic chunks of data centers. In some cases, whole buildings that are, like as I told you, gigantic buildings. And it's like, that's a totally different sale than what you're selling to network companies. And then the third buyer persona was this, was enterprise, which is Eugene's company that only needs this, right? Not a whole building, and they're not a network company. They're not looking for connectivity between all these places and cloud on-ramps and things like that. So those were the three primary buyer personas. That's not industry, right? I sell this to a finance customer the same way I sell it to a retail customer, right? So it's what category, how would you categorize your customers based on the products you have to sell? I think that I could have probably just said that and I would have answered your question. But I said a whole bunch more.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is.
Yeah.
Okay?
No, and that, I just wanted to point to, because when I said like segment the market, all of you guys, when you list your product, I mean, if it's anything like the last couple decades, it's going to be, 18 to 25-year-olds who make between this and that. You don't segment on demographics like blue eyes or green hair or whatever. You segment based on needs, or a good way to say it, buyer persona, or if you read Steve Blank, he calls it customer archetype. So it's really important. It's something a lot of people miss. Did you guys have, I just want to go, if you had a question,
No, it was me.
you want us to turn off the camera now?
I explained.
Okay, good.
So according to you, what would be some of the strengths required to be a good salesman?
The traits to be a good salesperson.
Perfect.
I'm going to generalize because there are definitely exceptions, but extrovert would be, I would say, would be the first thing. But an extrovert that's a good listener, talk about, right? Those are two. I would say a person who it's related to being an extrovert, but who likes to be out and about and moving around. And there's some people who are analytical and they like to be at a desk or within a constrained space and working with numbers and things like that. So it's a very almost like an ADHD like characteristic. And I am certain if I grew up in your generation, I would have been highly medicated, but I didn't, so I wasn't. I probably should be even today. So there's that kind of aspect to it. And then, especially nowadays, and it was different 20 years ago, but especially nowadays, somebody who's willing to put in the time to learn about the industry in which they're selling into. Right? So there's some legacy salespeople, who are kind of my age, who, or a little older, or a little younger, who used to do everything at, going to lunch and playing golf and building friendship and all this kind of stuff. That doesn't work. In some industries, it works better than others, but generally speaking, it's not the key formula for success. You want somebody who wants to go out and understand, well, how do these financial institutions manage their trading desks? Right? I want to understand that. And we'll do that homework in order to figure out what's happening. And so the sort of exception to the extrovert is something between an extrovert and an introvert, and maybe sometimes an introvert, is someone who's, very soft, low-key, soft-spoken, but highly credible. So, I was let's just say I was a shy person in high school and college, and I kind of like, I don't like going to big parties or being in large groups or anything like that. But when you put me out with a customer who needs a high-speed trading solution, I know all about it. And I can tell you more than any other salesman can tell you about it, even though I don't tell it to you in colorful language and with big smiles and personalities and lunches, right? So that highly credible person who knows the industry, willing to understand what the customer's problem is, that can be a good characteristic as well. Okay, is that?
Yeah.
No? Yeah, okay.